All right, everyone, welcome to this, as of yet, untitled show, presumably called 33 1/3. You will see what it's called depending on what I titled this video, and depending on how I feel, I may edit this section out. Today's the dawn of something new. It's I host another show called Fans on the Run. I've talked to both of our guests today on the show. They're a lot of fun. But, you know, I felt a lot of my favorite bits on that show were where I was talking about things that were not the Beatles. So I thought it might be fun to just bring on, you know, a couple, I consider them friends now, and talk about just albums we like. And in the infamous two-parter John Montagna episode, you actually heard him introduce to me the Dukes of Stratosphear. And I've been hooked ever since. And so I pitched to John the idea of doing an episode about the Dukes of Stratosphear's two projects, or one depending on which version you listen to. And, you know, we settled on that. And then I was talking with Ken Thornton, our other guest, and he was talking about the Dukes of Stratosphear. So I thought, why not let's make it just one big happy family, and we'll all talk about the Dukes of Stratosphear. So, guests, reveal yourselves.
Ken, why don't you go first?
Well, okay. This is Ken Thornton. It's kind of weird to talk about yourself. I'm a musician, and if you've heard of me at all, it's probably because I was a member of the Ruddles with Neil Innes and played guitar with Neil Innes for a number of years. And I'm here because I love the Dukes of Stratosphear. I'm dressed in my paisley shirt and my loon pants, and I'm ready to go.
Nice. I'm sort of ashamed of myself that I didn't get dressed up for the podcast, but
You didn't get the memo.
I didn't get the wardrobe memo.
Yeah.
That even though it's audio only, although I could just tell you that I'm dressed in psychedelic gear and you'd believe me. You have no reason not to believe me. So
I have no frame of reference for what you look like right now.
That's true. That's true as well. All right. This is John Montagna, bass guitarist, singer, and writer from Brooklyn, New York. And if you've heard of me at all, it's probably been through a couple of years I spent in the bass chair in the Alan Parsons Live project. I've also done the Happy Together tours with the Turtles and Mark Lindsay and Mickey Dolenz. And we've backed up Joey Molland from Badfinger, Denny Lane from Wings. I did the theme song for the WTF with Mark Maron podcast, and I am an unabashed fan of the Dukes of Stratosphear from the very beginning, and I have not all these years. I have grown up and evolved, but my love of the Dukes has not left me.
I guess that just leaves me. I'm Ethan Alexanian. I'm the host of the show. I don't know if I've already said that already, but you know what? Let's jump right into it. The first thing we're going to be talking about is the EP from 1985, 25 O'Clock. It was the first thing the Dukes did, you know. It's, out of the two, I will admit, it is my favorite. I prefer 25 O'Clock.
Interesting.
So, I think we should just go through track by track and talk about what we like, what we dislike, and what we just think about it. Yeah. Let's jump right in with the title track.
25 o'clock, that's when you're going to be mine.
I'm going to be doing more listening than talking during this one because I'm less familiar with 25 O'Clock. Psonic Psunspot was my intro to them, and I didn't get 25 O'Clock until many, many years later when I got the CD.
So I guess, Ken, this is just going to be you and I here.
Okay, well, 25 O'Clock.
The song.
Yeah. Well, obviously he was thinking about things like Salvador Dali watches and time travel and stuff. I remember one interviewer, he said something. He chose 25 o'clock because it was something that wasn't really. It wasn't real. Mm-hmm. And I found out later after I knew the song, it's kind of a common theme for science fiction and stuff like that. There's lots of stories out there where at midnight, certain people get an extra hour. The rest of the world freezes and they get this hour to do whatever they want, whether it's, good intentioned or not. So it's kind of an interesting that it's, I don't know if he was thinking along those lines, but it's actually, I've seen it in a number of shows, and maybe it's X-Files or something.
That's so interesting because I know that Andy was a big science fiction fan.
Oh yeah, and right? Comics too.
He used to read those novels, those really cheap sort of paperback novels, and he did that album based on the cover illustrations. That album Powers. You familiar with this? Mm-mm. The guy who did a lot of the drawings on some of those science fiction paperbacks that he used to read was a guy, I'm forgetting his first name, somebody Powers. And these drawings were they really captured his imagination.
Mm-hmm. And is that the one he did that song Rocket for?
No, he was it was basically Richard M. Powers was the guy's name. Mm-hmm. And he did these illustrations for these books, and Andy did these electronic music, sort of like musique concrète, sort of soundscape pieces. That he named, first power, second power, third power, like inspired by the different drawings that the guy did.
See, when I was listening to it, I never made that kind of science fiction connection.
Right,
I was kind of in my head, thinking about those, 24-hour Technicolor dream happenings in the 60s, with the numbers and the stuff like that. And I thought it was, something along those lines.
I think that's primarily what it is, but maybe it's just a coincidence that I've seen other things with that sort of theme.
No, I think
more
you're
in
probably
a science fiction
right.
vein. But it's definitely drug related, or because he's even said in interviews where, at the very end where they're scraping across the piano strings with the damper off and everything, he said that's supposed to represent when the drugs kick in. So
speaking about the actual song itself, it really hit me hard the first time I listened to it. It just slaps you right in with the sound effects of the clocks ticking, and then it just smashes you with that slap back delayed bass. Boom, 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 boom. And then it goes full in, kind of like I Had Too Much to Dream Last Night by the Electric Prunes.
Yeah, it's exactly what it is. Electric Prunes is the biggest reference to cite for that one, for sure.
And it's got that, Farfisa organ throughout the whole song that I just die for.
That's actually Dave's Roland. For the most part, they played vintage gear, but there are a few things, like for keyboard sounds, he had a Roland JX P3 or something like that. And
really?
So that Farfisa sound is actually that.
Oh, wow.
And it's Dave playing that solo. He also plays the guitar solo in that one. Mm-hmm. But one of the really cool things they did, they had, John Leckie.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
Which actually, before I go forward, I should probably say who's in the band and who did the thing. John Leckie, the producer, or as he was known in the notes, the Swami Anand Nagra.
Yeah.
And then we have Andy Partridge, also known as Sir John Johns, Colin Moulding, or the Red Curtain, Dave Gregory, or Lord Cornelius Plum, and Ian Gregory, E-I-E-I Owen.
Yeah, Ian's Dave's brother.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know a little something about where those names came from, because they didn't really talk about it much, but Andy's name, it came primarily from a DC Comics character named John Johns. It was like the Martian Manhunter or something like that.
There's
And
I
also,
thought
his middle name was John, and his father's name was John. So that was another reason he chose it.
I'm not sure
That's
if it was Colin or Dave. It was based on like a childhood nickname about their hair.
That's Colin, and actually it was Andy that came up with his name. But yeah, he was called Curtains. Like in the Helium Kids days, before XTC, he had really long hair, and he wore it kind of like Dennis Dunaway from Alice Cooper. He wore it in front of his face, so you couldn't even see his face. There are pictures of him out there, but his nickname was Curtains because of his hair.
Huh.
So Andy just came up with the Red Curtain based on that. And I don't know where Dave got his name. Lord Cornelius Plum. I don't really know anything about that. But
It just sounds cool.
And John's name was based on, he was actually a member. He had like an Indian guru, and he was part of a group. And he dressed all in red. And
I just
wore
found
beads
out
and all that
about
kind
this.
of stuff.
Yeah, he and his wife belonged to some kind of like. They were following some sort of a spiritual guru, and part of the deal was you wore red all the time, and it fit in perfectly with the fact that they were doing like a psychedelic album.
And they lived on a commune for like a year and a half, and actually it's one of the things that indirectly led to the Dukes happening at all. I don't know if you know the story about that. Andy was supposed to produce some Canadian artist named Mary Margaret O'Hara.
Yeah.
O'Hara, no relation to Stig.
Right.
And she was a devout Catholic, and when she found out Andy was an atheist, and Lecky was a member, he was following some Indian guru and was, into free love or whatever she thought. She was like, well, your vibes aren't right, and she basically fired them.
Right.
And so they had this time, and they got some money from Virgin to make this album. So, thankfully, that's the way it went down. Mary Margaret kind of. Anyway.
And with that,
she wound up putting on an album in '88 called Miss America, and she was on this show called Night Music here in the States. That was on for 2 seasons on NBC, hosted by David Sanborn, and she was a guest on that show at the behest of the late great Hal Wilner, I think that was like her only television appearance. So I was really shocked when I read the liner notes to "Surroundabout Ride," which I guess we should talk about.
Yeah.
The new 5.1 deluxe situation, and I couldn't believe that like there was a Mary Margaret O'Hara connection to the Dukes of Stratosphear. How random is this,
Yeah.
yeah. So you were listening to Surroundabout Ride, John. Ken, how were you listening to this? Just the regular album?
Well, what do you mean, like recently, or
to talk about the thing? If you listened to it recently.
No, I didn't. No, I guess I could have. I've heard the stuff enough times that I didn't do that to prepare. But it's all kind of stuck in my brain, probably forever. I've listened to those albums so many times, but I have listened to the Surroundabout Ride, and I did listen to it in 5.1. And it's pretty amazing.
I'm the only one here who hasn't heard the 5.1 mix.
All those XTC 5.1s have been really nice. None Such, Skylarking, Black Sea, all of them so far have been great.
Yeah. That's Steve Wilson's doing those.
Yep. Steve Wilson and Andy are doing them together, yeah.
Yeah. He did some great stuff on Jethro Tull's stuff.
He gets around, doesn't he?
Well, he seems to be the guy. There's a handful of guys. When my tenure with Alan Parsons kind of turned me on to music in 5.1, and he's another one, by the way. Parsons is an excellent surround mixer, and he's like a real advocate for music in 5.1. And Steve Wilson's is one of those guys that really knows how to make the entire room sing. I mean, to really make it musical. A lot of engineers will just throw some reverb in the rear channels and call it a surround mix. But with Steve Wilson's mix, I mean, he really and it's not gimmicky either. You know, so I just, you know, I think I'm similar to Ken in that, like, I've listened to the album so much that you don't kind of need to listen to it again to talk about it. But I went back and listened to Psonic Psunspot again in preparation for this podcast. Just so it was like, so jog my memory a little bit and have it fresh in my mind. And as soon as I heard that there was going to be a 5.1 mix, I wanted it immediately. You know.
Yeah.
So, but back to 25 o'clock. I want to hear what you guys have to say about it.
Well, I think we should actually jump to track 2. Bike ride.
Ethan, there's one more thing I wanted to mention.
Go right
See
ahead.
if you even noticed this. They did everything pretty much old school. They did like tape flanging and everything old school, and they didn't use any computers or anything for this. John Leckie did all the edits with the razor blade, all that kind of stuff. And one thing, I don't know if you noticed this, is when the solo section kicks in, they reversed the stereo image of everything. So if you're listening, it's when the solo kicks in, everything goes left and right, like opposite of where they were before. And it's like your head just kind of goes inside out for a moment.
I don't think I've actually noticed that.
Check that out. And yeah, when it comes back out of the solo, then they go back to where they were originally. But that's the kind of stuff they would try to think of to do to make it a really interesting sound experience.
Wow. I actually did not know that. Well, I didn't notice that. I'm going to have to listen to it again after. Actually, I think I might even play a snippet of it just for reference here. And with that,
headphones on.
Put your headphones on, everyone. If you aren't listening to headphones, people around you are probably annoyed hearing.
I think that was one of the key principles to psychedelic recording, was to make it an experience in the headphones, right?
Yeah.
Because if you trace the history of this stuff to the Beatles stopping touring and making the conscious decision to use the recording studio as the instrument, like, we're going to make recordings specifically designed to not be performed live. So it would make sense to keep, and that was what people did in those days before the internet and before Netflix. That was your entertainment. You put on the headphones and you listen to an album from beginning to end. And so why not have all kinds of crazy stuff going on that if you're really paying attention, you go, wait a second, everything's backwards.
Well, it only gets crazier from here on out. There's a specific song on the album, which I'll get to, which, it's basically like they're throwing every psychedelic effect at the wall, and they're all sticking.
I think I know which one you're talking about.
Yeah. So I'm going to jump to track 2, Bike Ride to the Moon.
Push me off to start the fun on a bike ride to the moon.
This song, it gives me very strong Syd Barrett, Pink Floyd vibes. Or early Move stuff.
Yeah, the fuzz bass riffs are supposed to be like Move inspired. But definitely lyrically, it's definitely Syd. I just love lyrics like bringing back cheese for my Auntie Jane kind of stuff. But just the ideas, I think, are fantastic, But before the stuff all came out, like 2009, I think, is when they first put releases out with the bonus tracks and demos. I would make my own compilations, and mine was called Cheese for Auntie Jane, and I made a cover for it, which is like this psychedelic astronaut holding a big chunk of cheese and the bike in the background. And anyway, it's great stuff. Fun lyrics, and
that's the sign of somebody who knows what's important in life, man. It's so much. Seriously, so much of this. I mean, when I've been, all this extra time I've had at home recently, I'm like going through all my old records and all my old books about the Beatles and things like that, and I would write my name on things, and I would, annotate stuff, and it was there's an interactive quality to some of this stuff. Like, your individual copy of an album really becomes yours. And then you take your own kind of liberties with it. Like I have a Beatles scrapbook where I made it like I used to trace the drawings off the Yellow Submarine cover.
Oh wow!
And I made it. You know, John's got his hand in the air, and I made it look like he's holding a copy of Rubber Soul. Like I drew a copy of Rubber Soul in his hand.
Yeah.
You know, it speaks to like the level of fandom that you would do a mixtape like that with your own title and your own graphics and all that kind of stuff. That's, you know, and I think that's faithful to the intent as well. I think that's kind of like what Andy and you know what XTC was doing when they were making this album. It was like, yeah, we can do our own thing too, which is like the root of all of this stuff. I think rock and roll was just, you know, self-contained. You get a guitar and you know, and off you go. You know, anybody can do this.
Well, speaking to the fandom aspect, the first album was just a love letter to, you know, the psych that they heard on the radio in '67, like Tomorrow with My White Bicycle and the early Pink Floyd stuff. It was just that, really.
Yeah, but it also it's the thing is though, I think it's, and this is why I'm so glad, Ken, that you're here, because it stood on its own as a piece of songwriting. It was an affection, not unlike the Ruddles. It was like an affectionate tribute to a certain sensibility and a certain vocabulary, but it's of a high enough quality that it's not just like a goofy parody. Like it's actually like it's how do I explain this? Like it has its own kind of quality to it. Like it's faithful to the vernacular, to the idiom that it's in.
Yeah, not
You know what I mean?
only is it dressed up in the clothing, but it's good, and just essentially the song is great.
Exactly.
But
At a time when it could not have been less fashionable.
yes,
Early 80s. I mean, for them to go like, no drum machines. No, we're going to do stuff from like, you know, because, I mean, what was it, 15, 20 years earlier? Would have been completely out of fashion.
You know, they actually talked about doing this, or Andy talked about doing this as early as Go To, like 1978.
Really?
He went to Dave and said, let's make a psychedelic album, and, you know, of course nothing happened until like 7 years later, but he'd been talking about making an album like this, you know, well beforehand. Yeah, and you can even hear like on Mummer and certain tracks on Mummer and Big Express, they're like, just, he was dying to do psychedelic stuff, like that one song, what is it, Deliver Us from the Elements.
Right.
The end of that song is so trippy, and I remember I fell asleep listening to it on my Walkman once, and I woke up during the ending of that song, and it was like, what is going on?
Oh, that's great.
But yeah, that's, so he was just, you know, when that thing with Mary Margaret O'Hara happened, it was just kind of like, all right, here's our opportunity. We've got John Leckie here, who's planning to do work for 2 months, nothing to do. Let's go to Virgin, get some money, and let's go make this. He only had really one song that was ready,
right?
And he wrote the others pretty quick. And I think Mo was the one that was actually written there in the studio. So it came together really quick. Anyway, Back Ride to the Moon. Not sure what else there is to say about that one. I know that the bicycle sort of sound at the end is supposed to be one of Ian's spanners or his wrenches or whatever.
Yeah.
From his toolbox. That's the only other thing I can think of. It's
and thus
kind of
we jump.
Interesting little facts.
Thus we jump to track 3. My Love Explodes.
My love explodes like the stars up in space for you.
Now let me ask you about that. Who am I the only one that heard that voice at the end?
Ken and I had a whole conversation about it, and he sent me it last night with the he sent me it over Facebook with the message, "Do not open this link." And so, of course, I had to open the link, and it was the song "Go Fuck Yourself with an Atom Bomb," and there was that
great.
like
Nice.
this obscene abomination.
Right. Now,
It
but
is
am I the only?
trash.
But am I the only one that thought that was David Geffen?
Obscene abomination of a song that I that is trash. That is
I thought
I've never heard that one before.
I thought it was
I-
Woody
it's
Allen.
Usually Woody Allen is what people think, but yeah.
I assumed the first time I heard it, I thought that's hysterical, and I imagined, for whatever reason in my head, I imagined them sending that track to Geffen and getting a call back from David Geffen, not liking the song. In my head, that's what it was, but I didn't really investigate it any further than that. It's only recently that I found out that it's just like a found recording of John Leckie just hitting, recording the radio in New York off of public
his
radio in New York.
Walkman, yeah.
Yeah.
It's Thule Kupferberg from the Fugs. He's singing this song.
Right.
And it is pretty obscene. I mean, it's just, it's not I don't know. It's we won't quote some of the lyrics here, but
Oh no.
yeah, it's pretty much, I can't believe they even aired it on the radio.
Yeah.
Really, but
Yeah. Well, New York
so
City
yeah, he calls
radio,
in to complain.
That's great. Yeah, New York radio in the 70s. New York in the 70s was pretty much, anything goes. Not that I remember. I was too young to remember, but it was. Yeah, I can see that happening. Again, faithful to the intent of psychedelia in that just throw anything and everything into the stew and see what happens. Here's something that sounds interesting, completely random. Yeah, put that in there.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I didn't even pick up on it the first time I listened to it, which now listening is kind of obvious. It's about an orgasm.
Yeah.
Right.
I've got people,
John.
billions of people, waiting here for bliss. All it takes to free these people is the power of a kiss. My love explodes. It's like it was one of my favorite. It was like when I first heard the album. It was like my first favorite. And that and Mole. And at some point I realized what it was about. And the friend that turned me on to him, he was like, "No, it's not. No way." And eventually that Song Stories book came out where he says that's what it's about. But
That's great.
yeah, some of the lyrics are, especially the more you hear Andy in interviews, that it's not beneath him to, get a little bit crude,
Sure.
Well, the first thing I actually thought when I heard the song was it reminded me of the Monkees' long title, "Do I Have to Do This All Over Again?" It reminded me a bit of that.
Yeah.
That kind of almost shuffly beat.
But you know what that is? He asked Ian to play a Charlie Watts swing, like on 19 Nervous Breakdown.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Like that.
Right.
That's what he was. That's what he was going for. Was that kind of a?
Have
he
you
wanted
seen
a
your
swing
mother
feel
baby
under
standing
it.
in the shadow kind of thing?
Same groove as Little Lighthouse.
Exactly. You're exactly right.
Right?
Yep. You're exactly right.
Very essential component to the vocabulary of that era.
Yeah, not a lot of drummers were doing that sort of swing thing
Right.
in a rock scenario.
I think that swing actually makes it one of my. Well, it's hard to say one of my favorite songs on the album when there's only 6 songs. But it's. I love it. So it's just full of energy.
Mm-hmm.
High energy. It's everything I love about 60s freak beat. It's trippy, but they're on speed at the same time.
Yeah.
So
I love that sort of like it's like almost like a gong thing at the beginning that slows down.
Yeah.
Like that. Yeah. Just sounds like that, and the riff in the beginning is kind of like a Jeff Beck Yardbirds thing.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
And it was that and Mole were my favorites immediately when I first heard the album. It's like I just kept playing that My Love Explodes over and over again.
And you know what? I'm so excited to talk about the next song. I think I'm just going to skip right to it. Side 2, track number 1, or if you're listening to the CD, track 4, What in the World?
What in the world?
It's the only song on the album written by anyone other than Andy Partridge, written by Colin Moulding.
Yep.
And the lyrical content is just, I find it so 60s, you know. Like 2033, cannabis and tea, what in the world, acid is free. And it's like you were talking about, they were using the vernacular and, you know, speaking to the sensibilities, even though they're a little outdated now. Like 2034, women fighting wars, men are too bored, scrubbing the floors, staying at home doing the chores.
Right. Making very sort of very profound statements about the world.
Which aren't very profound at all.
No.
That's the thing I've noticed about a lot of really good 60s music. The music sounds deep, but when you really, you know, peel back the lyrics, they mean almost nothing.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just a lot of, you know, it's like set dressing.
Well, I think there was an attempt at some point, I think Bob Dylan's popularity, I get the sense that people felt compelled, like, wow, we really need to, our songs need to mean something, man. You know, because that was the primary sort of communication medium of the day, was like pop records. You know, Frank Zappa talks about when the record business was run by old men who said, I don't know, put it out. What do I know? The kids are buying it, fine, put it out. We don't care. You know, and there was a lot more sort of experimental stuff kind of flew under the radar for a period because the business was run by guys who, like, what do I know? Some old guy with a cigar going like, whatever, sure, put it out. Give him $10,000. Make sure that, you know, bring it in time and under budget, right? It was only when, like, they brought the young hipsters in that went like, we know what a hit record should sound like, that things started to get more tightly controlled. But there was a time when you could slip these references in sort of under the radar and, you know, get these messages out to people, you know.
Well, I think my favorite example of that kind of thing is the Small Faces song, Here Come the Nice, which, you know, anything involving drugs was automatically kind of banned by the BBC. But this song is so obviously about a speed dealer, and it became a hit record, and the BBC was playing it.
Right.
And they were able to just kind of slip that in.
We'll talk about, I mean, the system kind of like failing itself somehow. Because, like, the moment you ban a track, it immediately becomes more popular.
Just like banned books.
Everybody wants to hear it. Exactly. That happened Day in the Life. Hi, 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 I think, was another one, the Wings track. You know, that it immediately became much more popular. Once it became, ooh, you know, there's an element of danger here. You know, and it's so arbitrary. I mean, they banned "I'm the Walrus."
Yeah.
For the line about, you know, knickers or whatever it is.
Knickers, yeah.
I think my favorite thing about this song, you know, What in the World, is the sonic texture. There's this, I read an interview with Andy where he was saying he took these ECM, Edition of Contemporary Music, jazz records, and using, like, the tape machines they had, were just speeding them up and slowing them down, almost like Only a Northern Song by the Beatles. You know, just these little, almost just trumpet bits just flying at you. Ridiculous.
It's very Only Northern Song, isn't it? It's very much like that.
And I love just when kind of the drums drop out of the song and you're left with this kind of... I find it almost euphoric. Just, you know, all of these different melodies going at once. You've got the ECM jazz stuff going on. You've got the reversed guitar. You've still got the mellotron. And words cannot express how much I love this song.
Yeah.
That's there are some interesting stories about the song, or facts, I guess. It's the only one where they have genuine Hammond organ on it. They recorded this in Hereford, at a studio. Was it Chapel Hill? I think it was called. And one of the guys that used to be in Mott the Hoople was from that area, so they hired this Hammond organ from him. And they started taking it apart because they wanted to get to where you could plug in other things to the Leslie cabinet inside of it.
Like you do when you rent an instrument from someone, you immediately start taking it apart.
They wanted to put vocals through it. They wanted to put guitars, whatever, because that's a common effect back in like late '60s. They start putting things through Leslie cabinets.
Through the Leslie, right? Sure.
And the guy from Out the Hoople came back and caught him and said, "Nope, I'm gonna go get my van and I'm gonna be taking it home." They had just enough time to record one song before he got back.
Oh, that's
and
great.
This is the only one that's got that Hammond organ on it.
I think not to keep repeating myself, but we are seeing like all of the real live, authentic, the implementation of all of the authentic elements of psychedelia. Which someone should draw up the list of, the tenets of psychedelia, all the guidelines, and one of them is abuse of equipment, right? Because if you read the Beatles recording book, it was like you can't turn up the knob until the meters are in the red the whole time,
You can't stick your bass drum mic that close
inside the bass drum. Exactly, the levels will give it. There was I'm forgetting which song it was or what they did, but there was one of the engineers was actually reprimanded by the studio management for doing something. I forget what it was.
I don't remember which song, but I think it was Jeff Emmerich.
It was probably I think it was Jeff Emmerich, and he either. I mean, I think that at one point they wanted to try and put a microphone like underwater.
Yeah, they actually got through with that. They put it in like a plastic bag and put it underwater, but they didn't actually end up using it.
Right. There was and so like taking the equipment, just taking the equipment, and
it was actually for Yellow Submarine, I think.
Right, that would make sense. But I mean, that's what all of us did when we were kids, right? You get a toy and you immediately, oh, look, a screw. I wonder what'll happen if I take this screw out. I'm like, oh, look at this. Now I can, disconnect all the wires and that sort of childlike sense of wonder and experimentation. What else can we do with this? It's very true to the intent of psychedelia, which is why I think this album stands.
Well, I think this song in particular kind of embodies that spirit of just kind of deconstruction, because as the song goes along, it just falls apart in the best way possible.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And John Leckie even said that, I mean, of everything he's ever heard, he says the last couple minutes of this song is like the most psychedelic thing he's ever heard. Ever.
I love it.
And it's like it really, like you were saying, Ethan, it kind of starts, especially after that. It's like the last time they sing What in the World, and Andy does that little vocal thing that kind of reminds me of the end of I Want to Tell You, and then it just goes. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And with that, I think we should jump to the next track, Your Gold Dress. Now this
is the one he knew ahead of time. This is the only one he had, because he had started, like, the idea of it came while they were recording Big Express. So this is kind of where it started.
I mentioned earlier, where they kind of threw every 60s production trope at the wall, and they all stuck, especially for Your Gold Dress. it starts off with that fuzz. Is it just a guitar or is it the fuzz bass?
It's a guitar riff.
Yeah.
And Dave said that he was and I don't know why, but Andy said he was trying to come up with the dumbest riff ever.
Yeah.
I don't know. It is. I don't know. I think it's kind of cool, but and Dave referred to it as dumber than dumb in one of his interviews. But Dave's trying to get that that "Hello, I Love You" Robbie Krieger tone,
Right.
and that fuzz, and there's he said the pedal that he used, it was actually a Boss pedal from the 80s. It was a DS1 pedal, and he says that is actually the best pedal if you want an authentic 60s fuzz tone.
Really?
So I'm gonna go out and look for one of those. Because all my pedals are like overdrives. I prefer overdrive sounds rather than distortions. But there's this
a DS1 distortion.
Boss DS1. Yeah.
That's just one of those. That's just the distortion stomp box that you
It's
can
just a
find
box,
at like any Guitar Center.
Right.
Yeah. But back in the 60s, they were too, like the color sounds and the fuzz faces. They were all pedals. It's like stomp pedals. Yeah. Not everybody was like naturally overdriving amps to get that, and especially that really fuzzy sound. That was usually some sort of a pedal. But
it was also something that you needed on command. You needed to be able to switch it on and off.
Like you can hear in Satisfaction by the Stones, you can hear Keith stomping on the Maestro fuzz tone.
Yep.
You can hear the pedal click.
I'm sure, Ken, that you've figured this out. Like when you're trying to replicate these songs live, you need those tones like on demand. I remember when we backed up Mark Lindsay on the Happy Together tour, and we were doing "Hungry" by Paul Revere and the Raiders, and he and I were talking about the fuzz bass thing, and he told me that Fang, the bass player, overdubbed the fuzz bass. There was 2 tracks of bass, and I'm like, well, how am I gonna? I can't just kick in any old distortion pedal. We got to really. I mean, you don't realize what a rabbit hole distortion versus overdrive versus fuzz can be. And there was talk for about a minute of renting a small guitar amp and getting me an AB box and just routing the bass signal to that guitar amp and just cranking it, and that the guitar amp would kick in, and that turned into being it was logistically too difficult. In the end, I wound up using my Sans amp, if I can plug Tech 21, my Sans amp bass driver, which has you can control the blend of the dry signal and the affected signal, and I had the settings marked precisely to where it was like just enough of the dry bass and the fuzz on top of it, and that gave us the desired effect. But I just think it's so interesting that here's this retro 60s thing, and he's using what we would call period gear from the 80s, but getting the same effect. You know what I mean?
But it's got the Mellotron, it's got the reverse, it's got the tape flanging, it's got everything we all know and love.
It's got the Nicky Hopkins piano part. And he plays the guitar solo on that one. I was going to tell you, when this album first came out, Andy did a BBC interview as Sir John Johns.
Really?
And the thing he said about this song was, he said this was his favorite song on the album, and that it was inspired by a conversation he had with one of his girlfriend's dresses.
I'm gonna have to find this.
That's got to be out on YouTube somewhere. That interview's got to be out there somewhere. It's worth checking out. He's funny.
Have you heard it?
I haven't.
Ken, have you? Because I'm curious. Like, did he put on a voice? Like, I wonder what the characterization of Sir John Johns would be.
He obviously has a harmonizer because he keeps changing it. Like, at one point it'll be like, and then the next thing it'll be like, an octave higher. So he keeps changing it, and every once in a while it's his real voice.
Oh, that's great.
It's got to be out on YouTube or something. Maybe worth checking out because it is funny.
That's great.
I really want to find that now.
If you can't find it, I can send it to you.
Please do, and I'll send it to you, John.
Thank you.
And with that, we proceed to the last track on 25 o'clock, The Mole from the Ministry.
I'm the mole from the ministry.
Oh, the thing I actually like most about this song is not the actual song itself, it's the music video. Because
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of promotional music videos from the 1960s.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of Arnold Lane from Pink Floyd. It reminds me of the Magical Mystery Tour stuff.
Right.
There's
right.
a video for I Can Hear the Grass Grow by The Move.
There's a video for I Feel Free. Cream track.
The one where
dressed
they're
up-
running around in the woods.
Yeah, they're running around in the. Yeah, everybody was always going off into the woods all the time in the
Yeah.
'60s. Nobody was inside. Nobody was indoors.
No.
Everybody was out in the field somewhere. Yeah, the cream. Yeah, the cream. They're running up a hill in slow motion, dressed like monks. You know, it was
But-
back when videos were shot in like an hour. Like, just get out of the car, run around, we'll film you, and then
Well, and we're fortunate to have the full video now, because back in like the early '90s, when I was collecting stuff on VHS, you'd collect rare music videos. The only copy of this video that was out there ended just before all the really trippy
Yeah.
stuff, like the last half of it, and then
When they're
finally,
walking backwards and
all that stuff was not there.
cups of water being thrown in reverse.
Because they probably only showed it once or twice on the BBC, and then so that the only copy that was out there was half of it.
Actually, my favorite
Oh, wow.
bit's the thing at the start. Here we see Chiddingfold House, home to the Frobisher Harrises.
And that
Frobis-
wasn't there either. Yeah.
Yeah. Its serenity has been rudely shattered by the strange psychedelic sounds of the English pop group the Dukes of Stratosphear and their latest recording, The Mole from the Ministry.
It's great, isn't it?
How hysterical is it that like this sort of these young guys taking all these drugs and doing this like mind expanding stuff, and where do they go with it? They go back to like the 1800s.
Yeah.
This like very proper sort of English. I forget who I heard talking about this. How the difference between like British psychedelia and American psychedelia. That American psychedelia was all about like Vietnam and this is the end and all this like really dark stuff. Whereas the English psychedelia, it's like lollipops and merry-go-rounds.
The thing
and
is,
tea
Alice in
parties.
Wonderland, tea parties, and exactly.
English psych
cricket.
to me is like that, but it
Right.
also has like a much darker element to me than
Okay.
American psychedelia.
Really?
Like to me, the American stuff is Happy Together by the Turtles.
Well, right.
It's
That's right.
Jefferson Airplane. It's
Yeah,
It
but you
reminds,
also had the Doors, and you had Arthur Lee in
Yeah.
Love, and
think
it was all over the place, wasn't it?
That's
But
true.
it-
I think it depends on who it is. I think there were also plenty of acts who thought like, oh, I guess because you can always tell.
yeah.
I was talking to somebody recently when I thought, if you listen to like any like the complete singles collection of any band from the 60s, whoever it is, when they put out that, their 2 CD, the full anthology, like the greatest, hits of, or the complete collection, and they put the songs chronologically, you can always hear that one song where they flipped, that one day that the guy ran into band practice with a copy of Revolver and said, listen to this, and they went, oh shit, now we got to start putting strings and French horns on everything and writing songs that sound like newspaper articles, and you know what I mean? There's like
But
every band has its Sgt. Pepper.
I've had this
know?
argument with a friend before about British versus American psych, because again, to me, American psych is like incense and peppermints, and
Right.
crimson and clover, and British psych is like Tomorrow's My White Bicycle, Real Life Permanent Dream, all
Right.
this stuff that makes you scared. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Well, the Mellotron strings are pretty scary sounding if they're not.
They are.
They're not used the right way. It can, because wasn't it like the tape
Yeah.
that they used for the string sound was like some scratchy, orchestra from like the 20s or something, or the 30s, wasn't it? It was like a really ancient recording that they used.
But with this, it has like the mellotron. I think it's like the pitch wheel of the mellotron being turned up and down as the song goes on.
Right.
This to me sounds the most Beatlesy out of all the tracks.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, it's obviously, it's got the Walrus, it's got Day in the Life, it's got Strawberry Fields ending. It's very Beatley.
It's the pretty, the pretty obvious, like dong gong dong gong, like that the quarter note piano thing. It's I think the most obvious Beatles rip, and this was again, I think, given the times that they did this in the 80s, I don't think the sort of like English psych vernacular was as prominent as it is now. Like right now, if any of us got a call and said, we're doing a song for a thing and it's got to sound like a 60s psychedelic band, we all know what to do. Okay, put everything through a Leslie, throw a Mellotron in there. There's certain elements to the vocabulary that we would know what to do with that, whether it would be authentic or not. There's just superficial sort of instrumentation and things in the arrangement that we would know to do. In the 80s, I think only Andy Partridge was as deep into this stuff as you would need to be to really faithfully recreate that stuff, with the original intention and have it succeed in that way. You know what I mean?
I think it starts off with, it sounds like the vocals through not even like a flanger. It sounds like a really fast a phaser, and then there's like a tack piano through a Leslie,
right?
Which, to me, that's one of my favorite sounds of all time. A piano through a Leslie, like Pink
Floyd Echoes, yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of Simon Dupree and the Big Sound?
We Are
Surely
the
you must
Moles.
have, yeah.
We Are the Moles.
So that's kind of where the mole thing came from.
Yeah.
Right.
I didn't know about them for the longest time. I knew Gentle Giant, but I'd never heard of them, what they were like in the 60s.
Yeah.
Until
But
Andy mentioned them.
That was... I heard about that, and then I listened to it, and I read that in the 60s, when they actually put out the single under the pseudonym The Moles, We Are the Moles Part 1 and 2, it was just credited to the Moles, and it was on Parlophone, so everyone thought this was some sort of Beatles side project.
Yeah, they all thought
and that
it was the
Ringo
Beatles.
was singing.
Yeah.
It's like, we are the moles and we stay in our holes.
I think it's really interesting that for so long, anything that sounded remotely Beatle-y that was a group that no one had heard of, people would think that it was the Beatles, that it was secretly the Beatles.
Klaatu would like to have a word
Klaatu,
with you.
Klaatu, or Emmett Rhodes, may he rest in peace. When that record first came out, everybody thought, "Oh, this is McCartney. This is the new Paul McCartney album." Because it sounded, he got so close to the original intention that anyone doing anything that sounded like that, people just assumed, well, this is, the Beatles in disguise. And I think that people were also really hopeful for a reunion.
Little fun fact about that Simon Dupree and the Big Sound thing.
Yeah.
It was only found out that it was Simon Dupree and the Big Sound because Syd Barrett had accidentally, revealed that in, I think it was the NME.
Really?
Yeah. He was asked who the Moles were, and he said Simon. And the thing is, I'm about 80% sure that Elton John actually plays on that single. Back when he was Reg Dwight, because he was in Simon Dupree and the Big Sound.
Elton John's probably played on a ton of stuff that he doesn't even remember when he was a session player.
He was the studio guy.
I was going to mention that one of the things that's amazing about this song is that it was written and fully recorded in less than 2 days.
Really?
Yeah. The story is that so they had Mellotron. They had a few tape racks for the Mellotron. They had like the brass and strings and the male voices that you can hear like on Human Alchemy on the Mummer album.
Yeah.
Then Dave was going somewhere. I think it was Sheffield or something. He was driving to go pick up more tape racks. They wanted the Mellotron flutes and some of the other strings and that. And while he was driving back and forth is when Andy suddenly had this song, this melody. It all just sort of fell out of the sky. And then they he finished up writing it, and within 2 days they had the whole thing done. I think that's pretty amazing.
Oh, and I think the biggest kind of direct copy from the Beatles on that is at the end where they're like, ho ho, hee, ho ho.
Yeah, right. Mole, mole, mole. Yeah.
Like,
It
that's,
really, you really got to know what you're doing to like actually just recycle, lyrics and sounds and stuff like that without and have it be okay. Like they're copying something, but we're letting it slide.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not like a ripoff. It's actually there's just I don't know if there's just a limited number of ideas or if there's a specific set of imagery that you use with this stuff, but like it really takes a certain amount of finesse to literally like recycle stuff and have it work.
Especially, being as bold as Andy Partridge was with recycling the Beatles stuff, which everyone knows. And with that, I think we should move on to Psonic Psunspot.
Yeah.
Hey, Ethan, there's a couple more things I throw in real quick.
Sure.
One thing about Mole, if you have the original vinyl, when it was being cut to disc, John Leckie, he added reverb to the middle section when it's like the day in the life, ahs and that, and when the horse sound comes in, he actually added a bunch more reverb while they were cutting it to disc. So that's the only place where you hear that. On the CD, it doesn't have all that extra reverb in that middle section. And another thing about that horse sound is one of the very first things they did before recording was they made these compilations of sound effects on a couple tapes. They made they took stuff from all sorts of record albums, and including some of the stuff you mentioned earlier, Ethan, about the jazz sounds. Yeah. But there's like animal sounds and all sorts of stuff. And they would have, whenever they were mixing, John Leckie would have these two machines running and have them on two channels on the board. And the way he put it was, anytime the mix kind of got boring, I would just crank up the fader on one of the sound effects things and it'd be completely random. So you can never recreate it. Right. But that horse being there is a completely random. It seems perfect, like it's meant to be, like they intentionally did, but it was just a random thing. And you could never recreate it because the next time you did the mix, the horse or whatever would be in a completely different place. So anyway, any of the people that have the original vinyl, there is something that's a little different about it in that middle section of that song.
That's great.
Oh,
that's
and if my memory serves me correct, the original vinyl has like on the original British copies, just like with Sgt. Pepper, it has a locked groove with the aforementioned earlier, go and fuck yourself with an atom bomb, sped up and reversed.
Really?
Yeah. It's actually Thule from the original radio broadcast. They took just a snippet of him singing the chorus, sped it up backwards, and put it in the inner groove. So it just goes on and on and on forever.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And with that, we proceed to Psonic Psunspot.
There you go.
Yeah.
And we shall start with the first song, Vanishing Girl.
Someone's knocking in the distance, but a different line.
It took me, the first time I heard this track was when I got the album on cassette. I was 1987. I was 15 years old. I was a sophomore at Music and Art High School, and really heavily into what we would now call power pop, even though I didn't know that that's what it was called. I was a big Smithereens fan. I loved the Bangles. I loved Elvis Costello, and Squeeze, Wendy and Lisa, and there was a little bit of like some of like the color and the vibe of the 60s psychedelic thing infiltrating some of the pop music in the 80s,
especially the Bangles.
For sure. But when I saw Wendy and Lisa, the Bangles were sort of like relegated to, second place for a little while. But that's a conversation for another podcast.
Yeah.
And I just, what was going on in rock and roll at the time, Bon Jovi and U2, I never connected with that stuff. But there was a little bit of 60s reissue fever going on with like CDs were coming out and they were reissuing all the old catalog stuff. 20th anniversary of Sgt. Pepper was a big deal.
And this was at the time when they were, especially over in England, psychedelic compilations were in full swing.
It was just
they were pumping out, the rub, or what was it called?
Nuggets. That's an American.
That's
thing.
the American one. The British one, I think it's Rubble.
Okay.
And then there was earlier in the decade, chocolate soup for diabetics.
Right. Yeah, you were telling me about that one.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? Can I actually read you something that I just found online?
You most certainly can, John.
Okay. So this was the review back in 87. There was no internet, there was no YouTube, there was no social media. I got my music news from the radio. Sometimes from TV, but mostly it was the Village Voice. Tower Records had a magazine called Pulse.
Yes.
And Rolling Stone.
Yeah.
And I would read reviews in Rolling Stone, and if something struck me, that became like, I'd make a mental note. And there was a Tower Records like around the corner from my high school on 66th and Broadway. And I spent like way too much time and money there during high school. So I think it was the December 87 issue of Rolling Stone. I went looking for this review in preparation for this podcast, and I found it on an XTC website. So the Dukes of Stratosphear it was a review of Psonic Psunspot. The Dukes of Stratosphear are XTC's psychedelic alter ego. XTC first donned this paisley disguise for the import-only psychedelic Send Up 25 o'clock, and they spelled Send Up PSE.
Yeah.
So that album was a day-glow orgy of sound effects and Pink Floydisms. Sonic Sunspot parodies a broader range of targets, including The Move, The Hollies, Love, and The Small Faces, and it owes no small debt to the Ruddles. The songwriting is strong enough to make Sonic Sunspot seem like an etude for the latest XTC album, Skylarking, itself a not-so-oblique nod to the Beatles. Reflects the particularly British flair for the whimsical and absurd. Kaleidoscope features a Lennon-esque word collage about sleeping and dreaming. Have You Seen Jackie is a topsy-turvy sexual romp in the grand tradition of I'm a Boy and the Kinks' Lola. A little English girl recites Alice in Wonderland-type nonsense between the songs. Hints of the Fab Four are all over the record. And this is the line that got me. You're a good man, Albert Brown. Sounds like an imitation of the Monkees imitating Sgt. Pepper. Right? No extended raga rave-ups. Just 10 witty reminders of not only the silliness and self-indulgence of psychedelic pop, but also its unbridled inventiveness. I read that review.
Dayglow orgy.
Yeah. I read that review and I was like, oh, I want this record. This is right up my alley, because I was looking for that, what you now call freak beat, that sort of balance between like the psychedelic dayglow stuff and the hard rock, And there were a few like I think the Smithereens kind of had a certain amount of that, certainly the Bangles, and I remember I had a Hollies album. My only Hollies album was an album called More Great Hits, and I've never. It's on EMI, and there's like 10 songs on it, and it's got some of the early. It's got I'm Alive. It's got On a Carousel. It's got Carrie Ann. It also has King Midas in reverse.
King Midas in reverse.
You know, and the photos are sort of like. On the back are all like sort of color tinted in a strange kind of way. It's like mildly psychedelic. So this, when I read that review, I was like, ooh, this is the album for me. And the thing was that I didn't really know XTC yet. I'd heard of them, but I didn't know any of their songs. I didn't know who Andy Partridge was. I didn't know them yet. So I got into XTC sort of backwards.
I'm the same
through
way,
the Dukes
John.
of Stratosphere, yeah.
The Dukes were my gateway to XTC as well.
Really? I'm so glad to hear that. I thought I was the only one. I'm so glad to hear that I'm not the only person that and not only that, but like the first XTC album I heard was Skylarking, and it was I borrowed a cassette copy from the Lincoln Center Library, which was across the street from my high school, and it was rewound to side 2. So I initially thought Earn Enough for Us opens the album.
Oh.
I guess I popped it into my Walkman on the way home without looking at it or something like that. I don't know. But in any case, so back in 87, it would have been either December 87, January of 88. I think I talked about this on our last interview, Ethan, where I used to get Tower Records gift certificates for Christmas.
Yeah.
And that week between Christmas and New Year's, when everything's kind of quiet, I would do like the ritual, like visit into the city and go to Tower. And I think in one trip, I brought home Cloud 9, George Harrison, which I'd been waiting for. I'd been hearing the singles on the radio.
Yeah.
The Lime Spiders, Cave Comes Alive, another sort of attempt at like trashy psychedelic rock, and the Dukes of Stratosphear. And I think the Dukes was the first tape that I popped into the Walkman, and Vanishing Girl came on. And initially I thought, like, there's nothing really psychedelic about this track. I was expecting all this Dayglow, backwards, Les Lead kind of stuff, and then like this kind of straight ahead, Holly's vibe comes on.
I last night I listened to Psonic Psunspot again, and that's the only note I have written. It says very Hollies like.
Yeah, I didn't catch the Hollies thing initially, but it was only like years later, after I'd started touring with Alan Parsons and getting used to like all the different singers that he used to have, and Alan Clark sang on a bunch of the project stuff, he sang on Breakdown on iRobot, and I got more familiar with the Alan Clark, that sort of that kind of that timbre. I went back and listened to Vanishing Girl. I was like, oh my God, he's totally doing Alan Clark here. How did I not catch this right away? And all the the girl, I mean, they really understand the vocabulary perfectly. But they also happen to just, like, if you told me this was a Long Lost Hollies track, I would think, oh, this is fantastic. And again, totally stands on its own. And that opening the album, I thought, like, well, what's psychedelic about this? But
then sounds like it could have fit on, Butterfly or Evolution.
Totally. Totally. I mean, you've got the tremolo guitar, you've got the sort of like randomness of the poetry of the lyrics, but you could play this song live with 2 guitars, bass, and drums. There's nothing too outlandish about it until, I took the strangely glaring ticket. I was like, oh yeah, right, okay. Now I see what they mean. And you
John,
get into
since your main instrument is bass, that's your forte. It's interesting. This is one that Andy plays bass on.
That's right.
Colin's playing rhythm guitar.
I just found this out. Yeah, that boom, boom, like right away.
Yeah.
There's a bass riff, and I think that's a a line of study that I don't think gets discussed enough is the bass playing in psychedelic rock. I mean, it's like you take from basically McCartney's bass playing on Sgt. Pepper. That's like a big component of a lot of this music is like these big, fat, chunky bass lines that are melodic on their own, and then they sit like up in the higher register.
It's either that or they're very simple and very percussive. Where they basically almost double as just like where the bass drum would be. Just like
Right.
dum 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 kind
Right.
of thing.
Well, again, I have to think that once they knew that they weren't touring anymore and they weren't going to be playing these songs live, that opened up a whole new world of possibilities from an orchestration point of view. You know what I mean? People just assume, oh, we'll drop a bunch of acid or, smoke a bunch of weed and get completely wrecked and like lie around making up whatever pops into our head. No, I think there was a lot more careful consideration for making stuff that was musical. And that's all I have to say about that.
A couple of gear things that popped into my head that are kind of interesting. And the bass, for the most part, on the albums is Colin's 65p bass.
Wow. Okay. I wondered
I think
about that.
when Andy played on this album, there was like a 60s Fender Mustang bass there in the studio that Andy played. Probably because it's
Right.
maybe a smaller scale. Maybe it was more comfortable for him or something. But Ian, he played a 60s Ludwig kit.
Okay.
And what he did that was really interesting is he tuned his drums differently for every single song.
Really?
Really?
Every song.
I wonder what the...
And some of it maybe just to be like, I don't know, not just to make it sonically different, but like maybe for the Hollies, he said, well, maybe should have a tighter snare or something on this. Maybe there was some more purpose to it in some cases.
Right.
That I don't
Right.
know,
That's what I'm wondering. Like, what was the,
Because I'm thinking maybe like the snare sounds very kind of loose on You're a Good Man, Albert Brown. So that's kind of what I'm thinking.
In fact, I'm not sure what the snare does on Albert Brown, actually.
So You're a Good Man,
I think that's...
Albert Brown.
Oh, there's a backbeat on that? Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I don't know if you can hear the thunder. Hopefully my power
No,
won't go out.
I was hearing some birds chirping at the beginning of this. Is
I
that
know.
you, Ethan?
Yeah.
No, that wasn't me.
It was me, and I had my
Okay.
window open, but when it started pouring
Okay.
down rain, I said, well, maybe I should close my window.
Yeah.
But we've got a storm coming through, so if you
Really?
lose me, it's probably I got cut off and the power
Okay.
going out. But hopefully not. We'll see.
With this, should
Yeah.
we proceed to the next track?
Let's do it.
Have you seen Jackie?
Instantly psychedelic.
Yeah. It's got
That
that.
ominous, the ominous.
Obviously Sid,
Yeah, and it's got what sounds like reversed hi-hats, and it almost sounds like a reversed harpsichord.
It's an auto harp.
There it is.
It's Colin's playing an auto harp, and it's backwards in the intro.
It reminds me a
It
lot
was
of...
originally called "Have You Seen Sydney?" Because I mean, I think you probably know that.
Really, I didn't know that.
I didn't know
It was
that.
yeah. It was supposed to be a nod to Sid Barrett again.
Well, I was going to say, it sounds very Arnold Lane.
Arnold Lane, gender bending, all that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very much Sid.
And it's got this, I think it's an organ somewhere with a wah that makes
Yeah.
it sound like the opening of Ogden's Not Gone Flake. Or
Yeah.
there's a bit in Pictures of Matchstick Men by the Status Quo that's kind of,
It's-
a wah-ing organ.
It's Dave's Roland again through an old
That
Vox
fucking
wah pedal.
Roland. I keep thinking it's a Farfisa. It does its job well.
Yeah. No, he definitely used more authentic sort of tones when he did use it. But yeah, it's his old Roland JXP3 again through an old Vox wah pedal.
Interesting.
The thing is, with the subject matter of the song, I'm not able to tell if it's like extremely progressive for its time or it's extremely dated and offensive now. I can't tell where it stands.
She was a boy.
Well, in the end, yeah, they reveal, if that voice is to be trusted, then that's what it is. I don't know that it's, maybe even that deep. Maybe it's, is it that deep, or is it just we're just playing around with, using multiple genders in one sentence? Mm-hmm. He's a strange little girl, or
makeup on his face and his hair in curls.
Yeah, right. It just are they just words that sound good? Who knows?
It could be just one of those things that, it's meant to make you think, but when you realize what it's actually, or when you actually listen to it, there's not much of substance there.
Well, I also think that possibly I've never done acid, so I don't know firsthand what it does to you and how it makes you perceive reality. But from what I've heard, you do get into these, you can get into these sort of trance states where you're staring at something, and it's like you're seeing like multiple things like at once. So you could be staring at a person, not knowing if it's a boy or a girl, or a man and a woman, but it's both, but it's neither. You know what I mean? You hear these people, you hear the same story over and over again. All of a sudden, I became aware of the interconnectedness of everything in the universe, man.
Yeah.
So it could be.
Don't do drugs, kids, unless someone offers, and don't be a narc.
Right.
See,
just say who I forget who said this in the 80s. Just say no, thank you. But I think it's just one of those things that you listen to with headphones, and you're sort of in what's going on. It's like they're like this multiple layered thing that they're doing with the poetry.
I'd like to add, kind of somewhat related, that's always been one of my goals, as dark as it sounds, is to try acid. But the thing is, I'm medically not allowed to, because I'm on so much antidepressant that it would, completely destroy my brain.
Something, I honestly, and this is at the risk of sounding, a little too puritanical, I can't think of anyone that has done a bunch of psychedelics and thought, I'm really glad I did that.
Yeah.
I'm really thankful for that was a good idea.
Yeah.
Usually it winds up like, if I have any advice, don't stay off the hard stuff.
Yeah. And and then you have examples like Syd Barrett, where
that's the other.
They're an acid casualty.
Well,
Extremes,
exactly. Yeah. So the data is pretty much in, folks. That
you should probably not do acid.
I'm going to err on the side of not doing it.
Yeah.
Something that stays in your system forever and might activate itself again randomly years later.
Although to some people that just might be more bang for their buck.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, exactly. And I think what I've also heard is that your psychedelic experience has to do with you.
Yeah.
And not the drug. Again, to the point of the American psychedelia versus the British. It's what was going on in Americans' minds versus what Brits have in their subconscious. Like whatever's going on in your head, that's what's going to come out of your psychedelic experience. Mm-hmm.
I find a lot of the British stuff I find more existential.
Right. Well, I'm content to just, stare at the album covers and leave it at that. I mean, I can remember being like being like a toddler, like 3 or 4 years old, and staring at the Sgt. Pepper cover, just for there's so much stuff to look at.
I'm glad you actually brought that up, because Ken actually wrote a song kind of about that,
Really?
about the Sgt. Pepper cover, called, I'm going to get the order of the colors wrong. Isn't it pink and orange, blue and green?
Yeah.
Did I get the order right?
Oh, nice.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. It was just I had this idea to write about looking at something like what you were just describing, John. And I initially had chosen a Salvador Dali painting. I was just going to write lyrics and see what happened if I just wrote about what I was looking at.
Uh-huh.
And instead I chose to do it looking at the Sgt. Pepper cover.
It's a fantastic song, by the way.
So the song became about sitting down and listening to the record album, watching it spin around, looking at all the images on the front and the back.
Right.
There's some sort of, more obvious lyrical references once you know what it's about. But it was kind of a fun thing, and it is. I'm happy with the way it came out. It's a very poppy.
Right.
And I got all my 60s instruments out that I had. It's a Ludwig 60s kit. It's my Hofner Beetle bass and my Rickenbacker 12-string.
You have to.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It's
Nice.
almost Dukes-ish, I guess.
Where can we find this?
I'll link the Spotify or the SoundCloud page where these are.
Yeah.
What's the name of the album? Raise Your Hand, Venus de Milo?
It's Venus de Milo, Please Raise Your Hand. It's a very silly title. There is actually meaning behind it. But I prefer the silly sort of interpretation of it.
I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is Spinal Tap.
Huh.
Intravenous de Milo.
That's great.
It's actually, the thought of it was inspired by a Terry Gilliam animation from a Monty Python episode, believe it or not.
Really?
There's this thing where all these works of art are like going on strike in a museum, and they have a vote, and it's like all the pieces of art raise their hand, and there was one person that didn't, and that's the Venus de Milo statue. So that's kind of where the idea came from. It's very silly.
That's fantastic.
Let's move on to the next track, shall we?
Yeah. Lighthouse.
Little Lighthouse.
Yeah.
She's a little lighthouse where she opens up her huge eyes and screams of diamonds.
For years and years and years, I thought that I was the only person that knew the Dukes of Stratosphear. Me and the guy that wrote the Rolling Stone article. Because I played that cassette constantly, and I didn't see anything in the press about them. I didn't see any other reviews. Nobody else that I knew this record, and it was just my little sort of secret. You know what I mean? And then,
now you're getting your due these years later.
Well, I got my due, like, I would say, like 5 years later, when I joined my first working band when I was in Berkeley College in Boston. I joined my first cover band doing the Irish pub circuit, and there was a guy in the band with me named Jamie Edwards, who's the keyboard player, and he also doubled on guitar. He's a great musician. He toured a lot with Amy Mann. He might still be with Amy. I'm not sure. And he and I would talk about music, and he knew the Dukes of Stratosphear. He knew this album, and I was like, "Oh my God!" And so. I forget what song we were playing. Like we had this conversation, and then like the next night or 2 nights later, we're on a gig. I forget what song we were playing, but I kind of looked at him for a second, and he gave me this look like he was trying to catch my attention, like kind of like hey. And I looked at him like, what? And he goes, like he plays the riff to Little Lighthouse on the guitar. Like I forget what song he put it on top of. I think we were doing Blister in the Sun. Down, which was like our big sort of like dance number. We were like a 4-piece, 2 guitars, bass, and drums band with Jamie on keys, doubling on guitar and keys. And in the early 90s in the sort of Irish pub circuit in Boston, like the rock bands, it was rock bands playing like dance music in the bars, and we used to get away with doing a lot of like early 80s stuff, Squeeze and REM, Elvis Costello, that kind of stuff. So Jamie played the riff to Little Light. I was like, oh my God, yeah. So we had this little shared thing. But that's my main memory of that song, is like for years thinking like it was just like I was the only one. But then when you have that sort of spark of connection with somebody on something that you think is totally obscure, it makes it even more valuable.
It's kind of like me when I meet somebody that's ever heard of Pato. It's like it's like a shock. Oh, you've heard of Pato? Oh my God.
Who's that? To prove your point.
Pato was a band that John Halsey and Ollie Halsell were in the early 70s, before the Ruddles days, and they were kind of like rock with a lot of some jazz influence, a lot of weird time signatures, and Ollie was just an amazing guitarist.
Yeah.
I found out about them just eventually, like going back and researching things related to the Ruddles.
Sure.
And they were Time Box in the 60s, doing like kind of Northern Soul and novelty records and things. Very different when they were called Time Box. But yeah, Pato, I got into him so much that I made a website for him and everything. And I met somebody in town here. We had known each other for a few years, and then the name Pato came up. He had the copy of the first album. It's like, holy crap! Somebody else does know about these guys in Illinois or the United States in general.
Yeah.
So yeah, I know what you mean. It's cool.
Right, these fans turn up in like the most unlikely places, but that's kind of the point. I mean, you want the stuff to reach as far and wide as possible.
Yeah.
Ethan, John, do you know what the kind of initial inspiration for this song was?
She's a Little Lighthouse?
Yeah.
No.
It was Holly Partridge, his daughter. Like when she was a baby. He was just like the life and whatever coming out of the little baby's eyes, kind of. That was the original idea that inspired the song.
She's a Little Lighthouse. Oh, that's great.
Yeah. Aw.
That's great. Which, if I thought, if I, during the, whatever, if that phrase, she's a little lighthouse, popped into my head, I'd be rushing to write a song. And some great harmony. That's the other thing about this album, not to get ahead of everything, but there's like, when I got this album, I was in the, like I said, I was at Music and Art High School, and I was in the jazz program, playing bass like in the jazz band, and this album's got quite a bit of, like, it takes a lot of chances harmonically. Moves around through a lot of different key signatures. Like the bridge to Little Lighthouse, I think the song's in F sharp, and then it moves up to like A sharp, and then it plays a D natural. I mean, it jumps around a lot. I mean, he really takes a lot of chances harmonically, and goes around through a lot of different key signatures, but makes it flow. Which I think Andy doesn't get enough credit as a songwriter for being like, for experimenting with with key signatures and making them connect. I mean, I think that's the Brian Wilson McCartney thing, making stuff that's like totally, not totally odd, but like just making stuff sound natural, and then when you dig into it, he goes, "What is that?"
Yeah. Well, I think Mole is another good example of that.
Yes.
Just the different keys between the verse and the chorus, and then the ending bit.
Totally.
What I really like about the song is I like songs that when they start out, you think the backbeat is going to be in a different place than it is. So it feels like I have like my legs kicked out under or beneath me, and then suddenly the backbeat's in like, on a different note.
Yeah.
You mean like you think It's like when you're hearing the intro, you
Yeah.
think you know where one is, but it's really there.
Exactly.
Or like
Right.
the beginning of Honky Tonk Women or Drive My Car or whatever.
Yep.
There's all, those are, I agree.
Start Me Up is another one where he hits the snare on
so
one.
many, aren't there?
I was on a gig not long ago where we had to play Start Me Up, and the guitar player only sort of half knew it, but the drummer and I knew it, perfectly. So the drummer like hits the snare on one, like, and looks at me like, and we're like, yeah, we that knowing glance of like, yeah, we're doing it authentic. But then the guitar player thought that it was a mistake, and he like switched the beat to where he thought that he had hit the snare on two. We were like, no, that's correct. So it happens to everybody.
Let's go on to the next track. You're a Good Man, Albert Brown.
Yeah.
You're a good man, Albert Brown, and you was wounded in the war. I know you shot some people down.
You know what? It covers that kind of post-war Britain feeling that I feel like a lot of it reminds me a lot of, or the subject matter, Corporal Clegg by Pink Floyd off of A Saucer Full of Secrets.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But, I'm not a big fan of the whole kind of rumpy-pumpy,
Knees up, pub
Yeah.
sing along. Yeah.
Right, the pub sing-along vibe. But, again, like, the psychedelic sort of like progressive moving forward thing in reality is sort of them moving backwards into like these things that they heard as children. I mean, if you grew up in England right after World War II, that's what music sounded like. It was all the aunties and grandparents gathered around the piano, swinging mugs of beer and singing, like shouting at the top of their lungs. Because you was wounded in the war,
So you shot some people down.
Yeah,
You're still
I
a good man, Albert Brown.
I mean, that's right. And it flows. There's nothing self-conscious about it at all. It's like totally like honest.
Yeah.
Ken,
you were gonna say something?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I started talking over you, but it was it's about his actual grandparents.
Oh, is that right?
Albert Partridge fought in the war and met Elsie Brown. They got married, so it's somewhat
interesting.
Yeah, it's based in reality.
Right. That's so interesting because like the Sgt. Pepper, the whole bass drum brass band thing is McCartney thinking about his father's band in the 20s. And how they all kind of went back to like memories of their childhood. Penny Lane, Strawberry Fields, this is all, these very sort of comfortable, fuzzy memories.
John, I'm just going to interrupt you there. Ken, is the storm over? Because I can hear the birds again.
Yes, I opened the window.
Something very apropos about having birds chirping during this particular conversation, don't you think? Beats all of us like suddenly our voices changing or something.
Who knows? I may upload this episode in reverse and add some flanging over it.
Right. You should put some secret message at the very end, like put something in reverse, like speed it up.
Yeah, we'll record something at the end that I can put as a secret message.
Right. So Kaleidoscope, like another instantly obvious.
You got ahead of me there.
I'm sorry.
I'll just say, okay, let's go into Kaleidoscope.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you know that this song was originally supposed to be the album closer?
Really?
I just saw that they thought like side 1 and side 2. Was it the band that wanted a different order than what came out?
No, the band presented the album where it started with You're My Drug.
Wow.
Through Pale and Precious as side 1, and then Vanishing Girl through Kaleidoscope was side 2. But Virgin said, well, you got to have the hit song leading off the album. You got to have the hit song. You got to have the single, the first song. So it was Virgin's idea. Said, no, you got to have So they just swapped side 1 and 2.
I gotta say,
Kaleidoscope was
I
supposed to be
agree.
the original closer.
I agree with Virgin. I gotta say, I think Kaleidoscope was never my favorite track on the record, but I think it works as a closer to side 1.
Yeah,
Like
I
get
think,
the
I
really
think Vanishing
obvious.
Girl is a better opener than You're My Drug as well.
Oh, for sure. And I don't know how you could follow Pale and Precious with anything. Like by the time that song fading out at the end. I mean, I just remember my feeling the first time I heard this album all the way through, and that song fading out, and that's the end of the album. I was left with this for like a minute or two, going like, "What just happened? What was that?" And for an album to do that to you, and for you to remember that feeling 30 years later, it's like, So I think Virgin was correct in having that running order. I think Pale and Precious closing out side 1 might have made it much less effective.
But Kaleidoscope, man.
Yeah.
I think that may be my favorite song on the album.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I feel like it's the most similar to something that would have been on 25 O'Clock, other than, Have
Right.
You Seen Jackie?
Right.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of do you know the song Blackberry Way by The Move?
Yeah.
It reminds me of that a little.
It's kind of
Right.
like John Lennon meets Blackberry Way, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, it almost kind of sounds like the James Bond theme with the da-na-na.
The Mellotron bit, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Do you know that sawing wood solo they're actually doing that? It's not a sound effect record.
Oh, of
or
course.
anything.
Yeah.
They actually did
Yeah.
that in the studio.
Was
I
it
would be-
was it the
I
guy
would-
from Mott the Hoople's Mellotron? Oh no,
Right.
they
Hammond.
were sawing the legs off of the Hammond organ. Yeah.
I would have been disappointed if it wasn't them actually miking up a saw and a piece of wood.
And
I don't know.
yeah.
I always felt, even back in the day, I felt like it maybe was a little too long. I thought like it repeating the bridge again. I felt like I'd already gotten the point. And they didn't need to go back to another, instrumental verse or something like that. But, that's small criticism on my part.
I think you're right, Ethan. It's one of those where they threw a lot of stuff in.
Right.
It could have been. It's more like a 25 O'Clock thing, more so than
Right.
a lot of the other ones. Yeah.
Yeah. Kind of obvious, but again, you couldn't have like a psychedelic band album without a song like that
Yeah.
on there, But then they would follow up side 2 starting with probably my favorite track on the album.
You're My Drug.
Yeah. Which again, I didn't hear So You Want to Be a Rock and Roll Star until years later. I mean, I think I was already in college when You're a Rock and Roll Star came on the radio on the classic rock station. I was like, "Oh my God, it's You're My Drug." Like as soon as I heard the quick of the and the
Queero.
bass line and the 12 string, I was like, "Wait a minute." Which by the way, Ken, you'll appreciate this. A couple of Ruddle songs I heard before I heard the Beatles tracks they were based on.
Oh, really? That's
Yeah, like I didn't hear the first time I heard the White Album, I was already like 8 years old or something like that. But I'd had the Ruddles album like 2 years earlier. So the first time I heard Dear Prudence, I was like, wait a minute. That's Let's Be Natural.
cool. Yeah.
John, you're going to be very
fantastic.
disappointed with what I'm about to say about You're
Try
My
me.
Drug.
Yeah.
In my notes, I wrote, the only interesting thing about the song is the flanging.
Oh, come on, dude.
Did you read anything about that, Ethan? What Lecky did on that?
I did not. Please enlighten me.
The way the flanging stuff works is that you actually have to.
Yeah.
Like, especially if you want to flange the entire mix, you need 3 machines.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
And
heard
then
Tony Visconti telling a story about, going up to Glenn Johns at a party and trying to get him to describe how, the tape flanging worked. It's like you need 2 machines running into a third one, and you're, changing the speed on one.
Huh.
And then
Yeah, you're using vari-speed on one of the original 2 to kind of make them go out of phase with each other.
yeah.
Right.
But then you have to splice that and edit it back into the original mix. And John Leckie did that for every time they sing the word drug.
Yeah.
That's a lot of edits.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is commitment to an idea. I mean, that is dedication to a specific idea, whereas now you would just kind of like hit the button.
Couldn't he have just had it on like a different track and just like pushed up a fader?
That's no fun.
You're
don't
right.
know.
That's not rock and roll.
I don't know. I mean, to get that really authentic, true phasing and like flanging, make those frequencies just kind of rip apart. You got to do it that way, I think. I don't think there's ever been a real sort of outboard gear or stomp pedal that really recreates that.
I could not agree with you more. I was already messing with like flanger pedals at that point, and I just remember listening with headphones. I'm like, no, that ain't a pedal. There's something else going on here. That's much too thick. But to your point, Ethan, about the only interesting thing being the flange, have you tried playing that bass line?
I can say that I have not. Have you?
Many times. Can you hear this?
Oh, he's doing it.
Yeah, I mean, I can. It's just the strangest. You can't sit in a regular position. Why am I doing this acoustic?
I mean, I don't mean that it just didn't grab me as a song. I don't know why.
Right. Well, as a bass player, you can you hear this?
Oh, yes, I can.
Okay. So I mean, it's you have the root and the fifth and that basic pentatonic thing, but
Do you have a chorus on?
no, I'm actually playing a fretless.
Okay.
I just grabbed the first bass that was in arm's reach that was already out, and it happened to be my fretless. Because my main axe, my Spectre, doesn't have any strings on it at the moment, which is a whole other long story I won't get into, but it's I mean, just that, you have to really stretch out to get that comfortable. It's way trickier than you think. And I was really proud of myself when I figured it out. But then I also thought, like, how about that, man? Check these guys out. They've got me going back into the woodshed, learning stuff.
Is Colin one of your favorite players, John?
Oh yeah,
Yeah, he is. Me too. He's one of my favorite bass players.
It's a crime that they don't talk about that people don't talk about that guy in the same breath as, like, I mean, the Mount Rushmore for me, I've said this many times, the Mount Rushmore for me is McCartney, Entwistle, Jack Bruce, John Paul Jones.
Mm-hmm.
But then after that, there's like the next generation that includes Colin Moulding, Graham Maybe, Nick Lowe, Sting is on that list, Mike Massaros from the Smithereens. You know, all these melodic guys who I think are direct descendants of the McCartney concept of being functional inside the rhythm section, doing everything that bass is supposed to do, but also coming up with a counter melody that stands alone as a melody. You know what I mean? And that adds another dimension to the song compositionally. You know, and I'm a big proponent of studying bass lines like that because I think it helps to give you a macro view of the music. It allows you to kind of hear the entire picture the way an orchestrator would, and I think it's a very useful musical tool, and it's fun. I mean, look, it's you know, you put on you get a semi-hollow bass with flat ones, you start playing the bass line of Taxman, and then you're gonna have a good time. But it all, you know, when you start to train your ears to hear the melody and the chord changes and this very sort of intricate bass line, you develop an ability to hear the whole picture of the music. And so that song for me, you know, I mean, all the tracks have like some, you know, some pretty cool bass stuff, but that one, being the bass riff being so prominent, you know, really jumped out at me, and the chords to the pre-chorus. So, which I would demonstrate, but my acoustic is tuned down a whole step, so it won't work.
Should we move on to the next song?
I think so.
Shiny Cage.
Yeah.
It's I'm Only Sleeping.
For sure.
Yeah.
It's I wrote that in my notes, just I'm only sleeping, underlined. Just underlined about 3 times. Because the first thing, like, I heard, like, the tabla, and, you know, think, oh, it sounds kind of Indian. And then, you know, I realized, okay, it's just I'm only sleeping. Except there's this, like, little, you know, 3/4 time bit in the middle, I think.
Yeah.
Is that I'm not great with terminology, so I feel like, you know, the pipsqueak with you two talking about, you know, chord structure and melody and all this shit. And I'm like, I like the bit where it goes like But
well, I think the bridge is perfect, because if he'd kept up the I'm Only Sleeping vibe through the bridge, it would kind of get tired, as it were. I mean, it would just, you know...
It's
as
I'm
much as
Only
we-
Sleeping with the bridge from We Can Work It Out.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
I
and
think
that's
it's
a
more
device...
of a nod to being for the benefit of Mr. Kite.
True.
And they even have that, like a little speeding up calliope circus organ type thing.
Right.
Like the second time he sings We'll Do the Town Tonight.
Yeah.
You can hear this, like, you know, this like tape loop of, you know, like circusy sounds speeding up. So I think it might be, I mean, what you said is a good reference as well, but I think they were kind of going for a Mr. Kite sort of reference there too.
Yeah. I always loved how the bridge comes in a second time, and he just kind of just hints at it, sings the first line and out. He doesn't repeat the entire bridge again. He just kind of goes back to it for a second and then right into the last verse. It's like the real excellent sort of efficiency.
Yeah,
of
economy and songwriting.
That was, thank you. Yeah, yeah.
I mean,
yeah. They don't have to belabor the. You know, you have a bridge like that. You only need it once.
Yeah. Oh, with the music, I'm a sucker. I think you two have probably been able to pick this up so far. I'm a sucker for anything backwards, and it has, you know, a pretty kick-ass backwards guitar solo throughout the song.
Yeah, that's Andy, I think. That's Andy. It's not Dave on that one.
And
there's one thing you might not know about this is
there's
that
probably
song,
many things I don't know about it.
There's lots I don't know too, but there's one thing that I can't remember what interview I read it in, but the song didn't have an intro. It came right in with the vocal, just like I'm Only Sleeping originally.
Really?
Yeah, and at some point they said, well, you know, we really probably should have an intro. So what John Leckie did was he just did a mix down of the backing track without Colin's vocal for several bars and edited down to the front.
Wow.
Really?
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. I mean, it's so simple and so, obvious, but like, again, it shows you the lengths that people had to go to make those sounds happen.
Yeah, without computers, it was
exactly. There was still. It's interesting. They were like far away enough from the genuine article that it was like a retro. Hey, let's remember when we used to do this, but still close enough to it in terms of technology. Like if a band was to do a Dukes of Stratosphear today. Let's do like a 60s psychedelic thing. You would have to consciously seek out retro gear.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, no one would do a Dukes of Stratosphear like in Pro Tools. That's just, and we could probably debate this forever. Like, how authentic is it if you're recording digitally?
Kind of disagree with you here, John.
Okay.
Because that's actually kind of what I'm in the process of recording right now these days. To me, it's more about the feel of the music.
Sure.
And
Sure.
I'm just trying to get it as close as I can. Because
Right.
you can get pretty close.
Of course.
But, that's been, apart from the podcast, what I've been occupying myself with these days.
All right.
Sounds good.
I was listening to a lot of, the song 25 O'Clock, Real
Sure.
Life Permanent Dream, and the song that I have recorded so far is that, pretty much.
Nice. Well, far be it from me to say to you, like, no, man,
Yeah.
you're not doing...
If
you're
I
not
could
doing,
record it
It's
with
not
analog
authentic,
gear,
dude.
I would.
You gotta go rent an 8-track 2-inch machine, man.
Yeah.
Can't do a real psychedelic album into a computer, man. What's wrong with you? Far be it from me. No, please.
Yeah.
Well, it's just bands like Kula Shaker that are doing it.
Right.
And,
Well, you're right. Exactly. The gear, and to the point about the Boss overdrive pedal. I think it's the intention and the spirit of adventure. You know what I mean? There's certain vernacular to copy, but I think if it's more about like an attitude and a belief system as opposed to the superficial stuff.
Yeah.
Putting everything through flangers or whatever.
I mean, that's what makes it kind of really awesome, though.
Yes. Shall we move on to the next?
Yeah, my least favorite track on the album,
What?
Brainiac's Daughter.
What?
Brainiac's daughter made me a cigarette, some motor and a
It's like pure McCartney, isn't it?
That's what I wrote. I wrote
Yeah.
too McCartney-esque. I host a fucking Beatles podcast.
Right. Well, okay, but how can you?
Oh,
be
that was
too,
unexpected.
How can you be too McCartney-esque? What?
Well, to me, it
Is there
feels
such a
out of
thing?
place on a an album that's supposed to be, really psychedelic.
that-
Hearing something that could have been one of the filler tracks on the White Album,
That's okay. Well, then we disagree
and I
on.
yes.
Okay. We
Please-
disagree
please
on.
explain
on-
your side.
We disagree on the mission statement because if we accept the theory, and I have other fans who will back me up on this, and by other fans I mean one other guy that shares this opinion with me. So if we agree that Sgt. Pepper is the template for the McCartney solo album, in the sense that there's no such thing as out of place. There is no out of place. It's whatever idea pops into your head. I remember reading a negative review of the first McCartney solo album in 1970, where the reviewer said something to the effect of like, it's as if he's giving his full attention to any idea that pops into his head. And I'm thinking, well, yeah, that's the whole point. So there's no out of place. It's like I have this idea. It's a Gregorian chant. Like, great, let's do it. Let's put it in there, And you listen to an album like Ram. He's doing his like Brian Wilson, extended, through composed multiple sections thing with Backseat of My Car, and then he does a Buddy Holly thing on Eat at Home. And then he does Smile Away.
The thing is, I don't think I would mind so much if it was, so McCartney, if it didn't just kind of smack you in the face.
That's what I love about it.
To me, it was a little overbearing. That it's like it was distracting.
Well, I don't know. I think the spirit is there, though. I mean, if you listen to the different things, you got Dave's blowing bubbles and Andy's playing this kind of silly ocarina solo.
Yeah.
And there's like a backwards hi-hat thing loop going on, which I always thought was a pair of scissors. I always thought it was somebody opening and closing a pair of scissors, but it's like a hi-hat loop or something going throughout the song. So there's elements of that, the spirit of what, putting things in. And there's also a really weird one where Andy took a ukulele and he detuned it. So it's not tuned to anything. It's just completely random notes, and he's playing like this completely random chord. And he's just bending the strings up and down, making this really weird sound. If you listen to like the middle part, it's like, I think it's the middle 8 and the ending of the song. It's just really weird, like it's like ukulele, but he's just playing these. He's bending these strings up and down. I think so. The spirit of being adventurous is there. Now, whether or not the song is, so poppy and melodic, and the bass is so bouncy that it's maybe a little too McCartney-ish for some. I can see that, but
no,
I think it's wonderful.
think it worked. I think it works perfectly where it's sequenced on the album. You come out of these sort of like the dreamy, I'm only sleeping, lazy, Lennon type thing, and the psychedelic, hurry, he hissed. Splendid Queen Bun.
That was
it just comes banging in.
I did. That was also in my notes. The intro reminded me of kind of the, storytelling throughout Days of Future Past by the Moody Blues. Ogden's Nut Gone Flake. And I actually had this exact sentence written, had me in the first few seconds with the...
Right.
And then I wrote, and then it promptly lost me.
Oh, man.
So I love the splash symbol in the beginning.
Yeah.
Do you know what that is?
Yes.
Andy's chucking a rock into that creek or whatever outside the studio. I think that's brilliant.
I saw a picture of them recording that in one of the XTC books, I think. Or maybe it was John Lucky's book. I'm not sure. There's a picture of them like they're outside in front of like a swimming pool or something, and there's a boom. There's a mic on a boom like over the pool, and they're like dumping a bowl in it.
Yeah,
and that bass line.
It's the creek in front of the Sawmill studio. Yeah.
Oh, okay. And that bass line, which now I've plugged in my Gibson EB3, which has frets.
Is this the Gibson EB3 that was signed by Jack Bruce?
It is. I mean, what a great bass line. I mean, it's great. It's just so great, and then all that. I mean, it just keeps building and building and building at the end. It's just so cool, And I guess I'm biased towards songs with like strident bass lines, and I picked up on the McCartney thing right away. But like if you're gonna go in there, go in like 100%. All across the land, the bells ring out. I mean, just Andy's voice suits it beautifully. I mean,
Shall we move on to the next track?
I think we better had
The Affiliated.
Ah, yeah.
Clubs and opening hours.
Thoughts?
This song is like in my notes. I wrote like nothing anywhere else.
Yeah.
I think
Is in a good way or a bad way?
in a good way. I mean, it's not to paraphrase John Cleese in the Silly Walk sketch. It's not particularly psychedelic, is it? Right? I mean, it's
Austin Powers-ish. At least the middle part, yeah.
Right.
Like in the middle, it just kind of turned into elevator music,
Right.
Bossa Nova thing, yeah.
Right.
which
I mean, it's
kind of really caught me off guard. Like I was listening,
right, and
I
I
had
think,
another tab open, and I thought, like, did it switch over to something else? Like,
Right.
I didn't think I was listening to
they
the
were
same
all
song.
a little bit unsure about that, at first, because I interviews with like Andy and Dave in particular. They're like, it's grown on me over the years. It's kind of a
right.
common thing they'd say about it because it doesn't seem to fit
It
necessarily.
sounds
but,
like the ending theme from the show Arrested Development.
Well, I think this is the benefit of getting into this stuff when you're a teenager, like I did, because you just take it at face value. Oh, that's what it
And
does.
I
Okay,
did.
right.
Well, I'm a teenager.
And so, well, okay, well then so much for that theory. because I just didn't question it. I heard it. I'm like, oh, now it's doing that. Okay, so I think it's like psychedelic in intent, in the sense that you don't know what's going to happen next. But I think this song is one of those pieces of music that, like, it's so unlike anything that it could have been on. You could put that song on any album, and
it was supposed to be an XTC song.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, they almost saved it.
Which album would it have been on?
Well, it would have probably been Oranges and Lemons, I'm guessing.
Huh?
That was the
was Psonic Psunspot before or after Skylarking?
It was after.
It was after Skylarking.
It
Okay.
was Skylarking was sandwiched between 25 o'clock and
That's right.
Sonic Sunspot.
That's right. Oh, so that maybe explains. I mean, I'm totally guessing at this, but I would imagine, like, after the experience of recording with Todd Rundgren and all that kind of stuff, that to be completely free and unfettered, to go off and do Sonic Sunspot, that must have had an effect.
Yeah.
But only Andy would be able to answer that question. But no, I think in addition to being a criminally underrated bass player, I think Colin Moulding doesn't. It's a shame that he does not get enough props as a songwriter.
Yeah.
One of the millions on Oranges and Lemons comes to mind. I mean, what a brilliant song with another brilliant bass line. Grass on Skylarking,
yeah.
And
I Remember the Sun.
Yeah. And have you heard?
There's so many good ones.
Yeah. Have you heard the TC&I project?
I have not heard it yet.
It's a 4-song EP that Colin did with Terry Chambers. And two songs on there are sort of okay. 2 of them are as brilliant as anything he ever did with XTC. Scatter Me and Kenny, I think, is the name of the song. But it just brilliant. In fact, let me look at this up before I give the wrong information.
I'm gonna have to get that. I haven't gotten around to it.
I actually want to add about the affiliated. There's that announcer thing at the beginning, and I found out what that was from. It was an excerpt from a 1945 broadcast that says in full, "We're breaking into our programs for the second time tonight, this time with some splendid news from Moscow. Berlin has fallen. Marshal Stalin has just announced the complete capture of the capital of Germany, the center of German imperialism, and the cradle of German aggression." Again, back to the war.
I
It
heard
says something about Hitler is dead too, doesn't it?
Yeah, I heard something about that. That it was an excerpt from the radio broadcast announcing that Hitler had died.
I don't know about that. This is just the excerpt I'm reading.
Oh, okay. That was
Right.
just something that I know Andy had said in a couple interviews that he wanted that on there, and John Leckie and Dave both said, "No, I don't think you should leave that.
The full. Oh, he wanted the full deal.
No mentions of Hitler on our record, kind of thing.
Right.
It could have. Maybe he was just, I don't know, stretching the truth a little there. I have no idea, but I know he mentioned Hitler in the couple interviews.
Right.
Yours sounds more researched, though. I would have to say.
No
Ethan.
kidding.
I'm just reading
impressed.
off. I'm just reading off of a YouTube comment.
Oh, okay.
So don't think I'm too professional.
Well, it's Well, I was ready to forgive you for the whole Brainiac's daughter discrepancy there. But,
One thing I really like about the affiliate are those dual acoustic guitar solos.
Apology
from
accepted, John.
Andy and Dave.
Sure. Yeah. No, I just think structurally that the song it's again could have gone anywhere. I think, but it's just on its own. It's just such an incredible piece of music, and it does tell the story, doesn't it? I mean, it really just pubs and clubs and opening hours was all he knew. Then came her. And then he's back. And 8 screaming kids, but his seat's always here if he wants it. I mean, it really does tell an interesting story. And it's such an interesting piece, and it's totally rolls out the red carpet for Pale and Precious, I think, in terms of compositionally.
Speaking of, that brings us to the final song of the final Dukes of Stratosphear album. Pale and Precious. So, boys, what do we think about Pale and Precious?
I mean, it's the Beach Boys.
Yeah.
It's Be Still. It's California Girls. There's the theremin from Good Vibrations. Bom, bom, bom. I mean, like anybody that had like a rudimentary knowledge of American popular music.
Yeah.
What tells you? I mean, it's like, oh, that's right away. It's Beach Boys.
Yeah.
Which I think it's so interesting that the last 2 tracks on this tribute to English psychedelia. Well, the last track, I should say, Affiliated, is sort of like its own thing. But like, I think it's interesting that the last track, like their farewell track, is a totally authentic homage to the Beach Boys. You know what I mean? And not like one, they didn't do like one last, everything speeded up and backwards and through a flanger and like they went ahead and did this song that's much more sort of tender, not
I think
so
their
aggressive.
intent originally was to do that, though. I think Kaleidoscope originally was
right.
going to be their
That's
last
true.
tune. I think it works better this way. But
Oh, for sure. 100%.
I think it was Dave was like, why are we wasting this song on a Dukes album? It should be on an XTC album. Well, what do you think of it, Ethan? Do you like it?
I like it.
It's not your cup of tea,
No.
so to speak.
No. Again, I'm speaking about
Interesting.
this album as someone who heard 25 O'Clock first. Whereas you two, I don't know about you, Ken, but I know John heard Psonic Psunspot first.
Yeah.
But, that's kind of, 25 O'Clock is what I'm kind of expecting from the Dukes of Stratosphear. And it's, hearing Beach Boys kind of stuff is throwing me off.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I can see what you mean, but I came into this album with sort of no expectations. Not well, let me rephrase that. Not no
Certainly no
expectations,
preconceptions.
but no
right?
preconceptions of like, wait a minute, that's not the I took everything at face value, and this is,
I don't sound like
it's-
that.
it's doing this
I don't sound like that.
I wasn't doing you. I was, doing the sound of someone who goes like, wait, the review said this was a psychedelic album. This isn't psychedelic. The review did say like, oh, this is a Beach Boys pastiche, and they did expand their vocabulary beyond but again, I wasn't thinking of psychedelia in terms of like it's got to have backwards tapes and 12 strings through a Leslie. It didn't. It's I didn't think of it in those terms. So to me, I mean, it was they're wearing the Beach Boys influence on their sleeve, and let's face it, that was the Beach Boys at a time when like I don't think the Beach Boys ever got fully psychedelic. I mean, the psychedelic that we're talking about, but it's been pretty well documented that Brian Wilson liked his acid.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, didn't like him, but that's another conversation.
Yeah. Save that for the episode on Smile.
On Smile, exactly. And he's
just
I'm not,
for your daily reminder. Mike
Right.
Love is still a douchebag.
Well, that's again. We'll save that for another time. But Brian's talked about that. I'm not speaking out of school. I mean, he's even said like, yeah, I wish I hadn't done so much of that. But like that was his response to that period of experimentation. And I mean, and I believe that had Smile been finished, if he'd had someone whose head was on straight to make sense of all these ideas, it would have been a complete game changer. I always felt that was the difference between him and the Beatles, because no matter how wrecked John Lennon got, no matter how crazy they got,
they always had
in
Brian.
the studio.
No, they always had George Martin.
George Martin. Everything they did, even if they were marching around the studio wearing a bass drum chanting "We All Live in a Yellow Submarine," everything had to be filtered through. Everything had to make it up those stairs through the control room, and they would give them enough sort of rope to hang themselves with, and because the management, you can imagine at EMI was like, these guys are keeping the lights on here. Let them do whatever they want, right? I don't know why I'm giving them a Brooklyn accent when they talk, but that's but. Everything that they did had to be filtered through George Martin. And when you look at how Smile finally did get finished, whatever it was, 35 years later, it was with Darian Sanahaja, I think is how you pronounce his name. It was Brian's MD from his touring band.
Right,
in fact, there's a great, if you get the DVD of Smile, there's a great documentary about how Darian sat with him like with a laptop, and they had like recordings of all the different sections, and Darian was the one that was sort of instrumental in helping him organize all the different sections. It's okay, if you put this here, that can lead into this, and now we need another piece of music to connect these two parts. He needed a partner who could help him sort of organize all that stuff, like like what Billy Strayhorn was to Duke Ellington. And he didn't have that, Brian. So that's, but he was doing what was going on at the time, just pushing the boundaries of what could be done with instrumentation and arrangements and lyrics and things like that, So I think Pale and Precious is like an affectionate tribute to that, and an authentic one. Again, they pulled off the trick of like just direct copying but somehow they make it okay. You forgive them for it.
Yeah.
There is a good reason for that song being on the album.
Yeah.
And that is because Andy was pretty much a new Beach Boys Brian Wilson fan at that point. As much as he was into 60s music, he apparently didn't really get into Pet Sounds or any of that stuff when he was young. He got turned on to it around the time of Skylarking.
Interesting.
So he was really enamored with it. And it's funny because when you listen to XTC stuff that came after it, you can hear so much more of Brian Wilson-like melodies in his songs, like Chalk Hills and Children, all these other things. You can hear it.
Right.
He was really in the midst of discovering Brian Wilson's work, and I think that's a big reason why they included it. He made a song like this for the album.
Do we have any further thoughts on the song?
I think that's it.
There is one kind of funny story about it.
Please share.
So it was one of the last things they did they had one day left in the studio, and they recorded it, and Ian Gregory, the drummer, thought he was all done.
Mm-hmm.
You know this story again. Yeah, so he went and got, somewhat drunk. So Andy ended up having to play the drums, and because he came up with this idea, well, you should have like a help me run us sort of thing or whatever. But Ian was too drunk to play, so Andy had to do it.
So, are you guys?
You mentioned earlier about who had heard which things first, Ethan. I did hear 25 o'clock first, but it was all around the same time. And it was, when they put out the chips from the chocolate fireball, it was around the same time. And I'm assuming you know the story behind. That's a big reason why Psonic Psunspot was created. Was Virgin really wanted to make a Duke CD because 25 o'clock had sold so well. 3 times as much as Big Express. So they're like, we really want to make a CD, but you've just got this EP, and what if we throw some money at you? Can you go make another one? There's a big reason why this album was made, because they really wanted to make a CD of the Dukes, because CDs like around that time were really just starting to take off. And of course in America we got the booklet with the black and white lyric pages. I remember when the first time I went to England, I saw a copy of it there, and it was like, I opened up the booklet and it was all color, and I was like, yeah, we got ripped off.
For Sonic Sunspot?
No, for Chips from the Chocolate Fireball.
Oh, okay.
Well, for Sonic Sunspot, we also kind of got a cheaper package too, in that we didn't get the gatefold. We just got a
See, I only ever
jacket.
had Sonic Sunspot on cassette, so I wouldn't have even, I wouldn't have even known that.
Well, I don't own a physical copy of either of the 2 albums.
Yeah.
I have, and I know for a fact my mother has gotten me an original UK EP of 25 o'clock for my birthday, which is coming in the mail.
Fantastic.
Which,
nice.
Not a surprise, but well, it's not a surprise because I sent her the fucking link on Discogs. Like, can you get it from this seller?
Right.
I got mine signed by Sir John Johns.
Oh,
Nice.
dude.
Can I have it? He was doing, after Apple Venus came out, he did a little discussion sort of thing at a Borders bookstore in Chicago, which ended up being cut really short because he got kind of his stage fright thing going on. But he did sign autographs.
Okay.
And so he signed my 25 o'clock and my Skylarking, and I think I had a None Such CD and Apple Venus. And I made the most of my 60 seconds with him, I suppose. But yeah, that's hanging proudly on my wall.
Do you two have any thoughts on, they recorded, after these 2 albums, I think 2 other songs? One called Open a Can of Human Beans and Tin Toy Clockwork Train.
Just heard those for the first time.
Yeah.
On the Blu-ray disc, and
the Human Beans was done for like a multiple sclerosis charity.
Yeah,
I think.
back in 2003, after I think Dave Gregory had left the band.
Yeah.
They reunited all 4 of the Dukes of Stratosphear to record this single.
Yeah.
And then they did, for a promotional campaign for Eurostar, the train company, Andy Partridge recorded Tin Toy Clockwork Train, which was just credited to, the Dukes of Stratosphear, even though it was just Andy.
Well, so then they jumped the shark, didn't they?
And I just want to rattle off some facts before we completely wrap things up.
Yeah.
I'm reading from the Wikipedia page. After Sonic Psunspot came out, XTC had told the interviewers that the group were killed in a horrible sherbet accident.
Or there was a few other ones too, Ethan. There was like Andy was saying that they murdered them. They choked them with their own paisley shirts. Or they died in a bizarre kitchen accident, like they were whisked to death or something.
Oh, that's great.
All sorts of silly reasons why they killed them off. So it's a little surprising they recorded again, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
Anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Ethan.
Several sequels were proposed, but ultimately abandoned. including the mock rock opera The Great Royal Jelly Scandal, a prequel album featuring the Dukes in their early Mersey Beat phase, and a glitter rock parody as the Stratosphear Gang. In 1993, Partridge conceived a spiritual successor to the Dukes in the form of a heavily sexual bubblegum LP. Virgin rejected the album, leading to XTC going on strike against the label for several years.
There is a
Wow.
little bit of truth to that bubblegum one.
Yeah.
And they did seriously consider doing like a Mersey Beat Dukes, like a prequel kind of thing. Obviously, none of that ever happened.
Yeah.
And they almost did a single, I think. It was for some magazine that went under before they could finish it. They were going to do a single of Then She Appeared and It's Snowing Angels, which Then She Appeared was included later in None Such, but that was actually a Dukes track. And they never got around to putting out because the magazine that was going to include it, they stopped publication before it could get done.
It's such an interesting thing when something that starts out as like a side project for fun
Ends
and
up
the
being
pressure's
more
kinda off.
successful.
It takes on a life of its own to the point where people want more of that, and there's like a whole backstory and this like legend that grows around it, as opposed to like making an album under your own name where it's like, oh, it's our new album, time to make our new album, as opposed to this concept. I mean, you know, it's Andy Partridge is such a unique artist in that sense, where he conceives of like the band as a concept, as like a brand almost. It's a sexual bubblegum band, and it's called this, and all the songs are going to be about. I mean, XTC was kind of formed like that, right? He talks about how like we're going to sing about futuristic things,
Modern
like televisions
things.
and modern things.
Yeah.
You know, it's all going to be
You
songs
saw
about
that,
technology.
John
the
Peel
John Peel
thing.
Thank you. Exactly. Thank you.
Punk is happening and they'll buy anything. Is one of his quotes.
I love the This Is Pop documentary where he's talking about writing sentences, working overtime. Like, well, counting is always good. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You know, people like songs where it's counting and like, well, let's have a big chord. Like, you know, he thinks conceptually. You know, it's such an interesting way to look at it. You know, that he's sort of like in on the joke. You know, himself too. You know.
I think Virgin almost gave them more promotion for these things than their other albums.
Yeah. Why?
At one time, I had this like promo hippie bag. I don't know if it came out after at 25 o'clock or Psonic Psunspot, but it was like a shoulder, like a little had a shoulder strap, and it was a bag that had embroidered stuff and their logo on one side and a little vial of patchouli oil in it and some badges and some finger bells and stuff.
Wow.
I haven't seen one of those for ages, but I probably shouldn't have gotten rid of mine. But when the Dukes came out, I was just like the Ruddles. I was like, I had to find everything I could, press kits and
Yeah. It was
silly
none of that.
promo
I
things.
didn't see any of that. I got the cassette, and then like that was pretty much it. They would turn up every once in a while. I think I seem to remember Pulse doing a Desert Island Discs thing and mentioning them or something like that. But other than that, it wasn't until my buddy Jamie played the riff to Lighthouse on a gig that I thought anybody else knew of this thing. And I didn't hear 25 o'clock until I got the Chips from the Chocolate Fireball CD. But I just remember Psonic Psunspot having such a profound effect on me. It being this thing that just stood on its own. That was like definitely a tribute to the '60s, but like it was like everything you loved about that music in a great package.
It says here,
you know?
Partridge envisioned the Dukes as an amalgamation of your favorite bands from 1967.
There you go.
So, well, boys, where do we find ourselves?
I'm gonna be re-listening to 25 o'clock now with fresh ears.
Yeah.
Hearing your enthusiasm.
Do you have any final thoughts on the Dukes of Stratosphear?
I'm pretty sure I got in everything that I wanted to say about it. And I have heard the 5.1 mix, and it is a lot of fun.
I guess I gotta get a 5.1 system now.
You got to get a Blu-ray. I mean, it took me a minute because I had to get the a tuner, and a Blu-ray player.
It'll
and
take me at
speakers
least
and everything.
2 minutes.
Ha!
You know?
Yeah.
I
So
guess I don't have any extra thoughts. Just, I mean, apart from what you're doing, it's just encouraging other people to seek it out and listen to it.
Because, well, John introduced me to the Dukes. Hopefully this will introduce someone else to the Dukes, and the whole merry cycle can go round and round on a surroundabout ride.
Happy to do it.
So it
So,
was fun. It was fun chatting with you guys about it.
John,
for
where
sure.
can people find you?
You can find me at johnmontagna.com. All my stuff is there. And I'm on Twitter at JohnMon, JONMON. I'm on Instagram at John Montagna. The YouTube channel is youtube.com/John Montagna Music. And I just posted an Emmett Rhodes cover that I had actually recorded many, many years ago and was possibly going to include it on a solo CD I was working at the time, and opted against it. But then this mix was sitting unused and unloved for a long time, and then when he passed over the weekend, I wanted to post it, but I wanted to put it inside a video because people don't tend to listen to if you just post a SoundCloud link or something like that. So I made a short video that tells a story about remembering what's important and following the thread.
Ken, where can people find you?
Well, as you know from the last time we talked, I've got to be the absolute worst at putting my stuff out there or promoting anything I've ever been involved with. But there is that one SoundCloud page that I'm starting to put stuff out there. That one solo album I did is all out there, and so I assume you'll be including that link. But I'll try to get some more things out there. I remembered a sort of Dukes' track I did called Echoes of Light. Maybe I'll throw that out there next.
Please do. I want to hear it.
It's got even more cliches than the Dukes. It's got a magic bus in it. You gotta have a bus. It's not a magic bus, a cosmic bus. Sorry, mine's a cosmic bus, but it's all these silly sort of lyric things going on and backwards messages, and it's very silly. So maybe I'll do that next. I'll throw that out there.
I think we've had a fun time today.
Absolutely.
We've laughed, we've cried, we've all learned something new. Everyone out there, you can blow out your scented candles, you can put out your incense. Yeah. The trip is over.
Yeah. Well, thank you for putting this together, Ethan. I'm really glad to see someone who's devoting themselves to something like this and making the time in your life for the stuff that matters to you the most, and really, as we like to say, congratulations on your interests.
Well, I really appreciate the two of you, spending, I don't even know how long it's been. It's, a couple hours talking about the Dukes with me. Just some kid
seems like
in
it's
Canada.
been a couple hours or so, but it goes fast, doesn't it?
Time
Yes,
goes by
that's
when
right.
you're tripping balls.
Well, I'm happy to be part of your sort of initial episode of this sort of format.
As the original
You picked
slogan,
a good one, I think.
as the slogan for Immediate Records once said, "Happy to be part of the industry of human happiness."
There you go. That's it, man.
To everyone else out there, thanks for listening. You can go home now.
Classic top.